Your self-titled debut album came out in the summer of 2015 and it really put you on the radar thanks to the success of the three singles, Think a Little Less, Real Men Love Jesus and particularly Kiss You in the Morning, which went to number one. Your current album, Amos, it really seems to have taken your career to the next level. I feel both lyrically and sonically there's a clear sort of musical progression and it really establishes your identity as an artist.
I appreciate that, man, because that was your second album, I believe, is really the one that starts making that stamp for you as an artist. And it was really important for me to show a lot of that growth. It was important for me to be very honest and real, and it was important for me to show the fact that I grew up listening to traditional country music. And I feel like there are pieces of that scattered in this record, with songs like Her World or Mine. And I think being on the road a lot on the first record, being able to really learn myself as an artist, being able to really dial in what I needed and what songs work and to grow that confidence too. The first album is your debut, it's your hello to the world. Luckily, we got a couple things really right on it, and I'm very proud of that album. But as I listen back in the middle of making the second one, I go, okay, here's what I would have done different. Here's what I want to do different. And so we made sure that we try to nail that down on that second album.
You mentioned there Her World or Mine, the current single. I absolutely love that song. I know it was written by Brett Beavers, Jamie Pollan and Travis Denning. You did a performance, I saw it on YouTube, of you doing it acoustically at the George Jones Museum.
Yeah, with my buddies, Country Rebel.
What was it that initially drew you to recording it?
Man, I lived that song. At the time of my life, I was coming out of a 2.5-year relationship and kind of lost in that moment of the relationship coming to an end. And I was writing a lot, and I was writing for that and trying to get that emotion out. And I had a song that I was going to put on the record. And then I heard Her World or Mine, and I went, that's way better than what I just wrote. That was so much my story. It was scary that I called Travis Denning and said, were you following me? Like, as an artist, I feel like it's our job to make the best album. And I love writing songs. We already started cutting on album 3, and I got songs that I'm recording that I wrote on album 3. But I think it's our job to make the best album we can make and to be as honest and open and real as we can. And sometimes songwriters can dab into that emotion. And I love the fact that they wrote this song unknowing, not knowing that it was going to hit me the way it was, not knowing it was going to hit the audience the way it was. And I think one of the most beautiful things about this song is it allows the listener to put their self in it. And I think that's a big thing. We've all been there on both sides, whether it was your decision or where you're left with what's left of pieces trying to put back together. And I think that's why the song just resonated with me. Was I lived it, and I knew if I lived it, I knew other people lived it, and it was a song that needed to be heard.
Amos, obviously named after your late grandfather, and you've said in the past that you believe your musical journey was planted back in the 70s when he taught your father to play the guitar, which, as you mentioned earlier, ultimately led to the family forming a band and you developing a love for country music and performing.
So much of that seed was planted back then. He just had such a love of country music. I mean, whether he was playing little community center, a Moose Lodge, an assisted living home, whatever it was on his days off, he was playing like he was playing to an arena. And he took it that serious. And he was playing 4 nights a week and for free. His passion of it was just something that was undeniable and contagious. And he started teaching me guitar chords when I was about 8 years old. And my parents were going through a divorce, and it was a rough time, and music was my outlet. And that's kind of when I just fell in love with it and started learning about country music and the history of it. And I didn't realize the value that would have later on in my life. But having that knowledge and growing up, learning so much from him, that later on would help me out in so many ways.
I got the chance to interview Carly at Country to Country in Dublin, and you both have this incredible respect, knowledge and understanding for the history of country music. Do you think that's part of what kind of brought you together?
Oh, yeah. It's a huge part of what brought us together. Our first time hanging out, we bonded over our love of traditional country music. We bonded over our love of the Grand Ole Opry. We bonded over the fact that both our grandfathers had a huge part in our careers and our life, and a huge part in introducing us to country music that was way before our time. And all of a sudden you start learning about what made this record and who wrote this song, and you start diving in. And so her and I just spent 4 or 5 hours just talking, drinking wine, and talking about old country songs and listening to old country music. And we both kind of knew that each other had that knowledge, but never in the depth that we did until that day.
Following on from that, I have to ask you then, do you think in the future you could see yourself recording like a traditional country album?
Yeah, that's something I want to do for sure. I've always wanted to do it. It's in my blood. It's what I love. It's what made me fall in love with country music. And I think that at some point in time, we will definitely make a traditional country record and just put some of that influence out there.
I know you've been touring since like the age of 17, and over the years you've shared stages with people like Darius Rucker, Kip Moore, Sam Hunt, Brantley Gilbert, who I know you're playing shows with in the States at the minute, and also Old Dominion. Over the years, what is it that you've learnt from these guys, and how do you think your approach to performing has changed?
What's so great, man, is I get a side stage view that is kind of like being front row in the class. I watch every show. Every artist has their different thing that you learn from, that you take away and go, sometimes not just on stage, it's how they handle everything backstage. And I learned this from Darius and from Brantley is if you create the backstage area to be such this family feel, that's what creates the show to be so great later on.
Mm-hmm.
The show's going to be great when you're of their caliber. But when you allow your openers to feel like they have a part in that show and a part of that tour, it comes across when you go on stage because not only you get to do what you love, but you get to do it with people that invested with and you love. I've learned that. I've learned how to entertain from Darius and watch how great he is at handling a crowd and his lacks. I've seen the honesty of Brantley Gilbert. And that gave me the confidence to touch places in my life in music, watching him be so vulnerable and honest in his ways. And just a lot of stuff that you learn differently, Old Dominion with the musical things that they do during their show. And I just feel like I'm very blessed. Like I said, I get to stand side stage, but it's like being front row of the class.
You did mention earlier looking ahead to the third album. I know Amos was only released last June, but how far into the process are you? And how, at this stage, do you see maybe a sonic shift?
I've recorded 2 songs so far for the new album, working with a guy named Ross Copperman.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to be more of a country route. Definitely going to be a little bit more of a sonic change. But I think it's the most Michael Ray album that I've released so far. The first 2 I've learned and had great, success and I'm very proud of. But I think they both led me to have the confidence to make an album that'll be truly me.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I remember reading a while back, and a lot of our listeners won't be aware of this. Is it true that, I think it was back in 2012, you won an American TV talent show called The Next, and John Rich was your mentor?
Yeah, I did, yep.
Do you recommend that TV talent show route?
Everybody comes here with their own story, and I think you got to find out what works. And if you're granted with an opportunity to get in front of TV and to get in front of an audience of millions of people, you take that. I was doing 100-something dates a year in a van for 8 years before I got that. I felt like it was a blessing and something that God put in my life, and I took the opportunity. And I think that any artist, take every opportunity that you can. And I was hesitant at first, to be honest with you, because I was like, man, we're touring, we're building. Like I said, I grew up learning Loretta Lynn style and Waylon and Hank Sr. just getting his Cadillac and going and playing shows and building it, fan by fan, the old school way. I was a little hesitant at first. I'm not really knowing, obviously, that I would end up winning it. It would lead me to where I am now, but I'm glad that I took it.
Yeah.
And it definitely helped me speed up a couple of rungs of the ladder and help me get noticed by my label that I have now.
And then off the back of that, yourself and John co-wrote Runaway with you, which Big and Rich obviously had a big hit with in 2015. And then you recorded the song for your album as well.
My first cut as a songwriter, so that was cool.
Carly, at Country to Country in Dublin, she was telling me about your proposal in Mexico and the fact that even though you'd arranged a dinner on a private deck and hired a mariachi band, she still didn't twig that you were going to propose.
Yeah. She wasn't too sure what was going on, but I think when she saw the photographer and the white flowers, and she kind of started putting pieces together, but she said she didn't want to get her hopes up too much. But one of the funny things was our balcony in Mexico was overlooking where the private dinner was going to be, and so they were setting up all the stuff. And she goes, "Michael, look, someone must be getting married there tonight." And I was like, "Yeah, they must be." She had no idea that it was all for her. So.
Last year you launched the Wrigley Cares Animals in Need initiative. Tell us a bit about that, would you?
Yeah, so I adopted a German Shepherd Husky a couple years ago, named her Wrigley. I'm a huge Chicago Cubs fan, baseball team. As we were going through the tour, everybody started bringing her gifts and bringing her food and toys and all this stuff. And so the hurricanes were coming on, and me being from Florida and understanding the devastation of the hurricanes and understanding that it leaves a lot of animals on the street and a lot of animals that get taken away from their families because of fences being blown out or homes being destroyed and them being scared and running off. So I thought, well, if they're doing this for my dog, what would they do for their own community? Every time we go to a new city or new town, they give you so much that I thought, well, what would they do? And we asked fans to bring animal donations, food, blankets, whatever they could bring, and we would donate it to a local animal shelter. And so I think we fed over 250,000 meals. It's been a really cool thing to be a part of.
Wow. Once again, Michael begins his run of UK dates on the 22nd of October at Bush Hall in London, and then he's performing in Birmingham, Liverpool, Manchester and Glasgow, and hopefully in the future, Ireland, Michael.
Please get me to Ireland. I'm so ready. That's my bucket list place of all places, is to get to Ireland.